Hello, and welcome back to another episode as we look into 4 forgotten murder cases. Number 1. Mary Timney murdered her landlady, Anne Hannah, in 1862. Anne Hannah lived with her 2 brothers on a small farm near Carbshed, along the road to the well-known Glenkins. Just 50 yards away was the cottage of her neighbour, Francis Timney, who was a labourer. On the morning of the murder, Anne's brother left for work around 9 o'clock, leaving her alone in the house. Around 1 o'clock, a woman named Mrs. Malellan was walking by the cottage when she called out and discovered Anne laying in a pool of her own blood in her kitchen. It was soon clear that Anne had suffered severe injuries. Her skull had been fractured in 4 places, she had 2 broken ribs, and her arms showed signs of bruising and other wounds. A butcher's knife was found on the floor, covered in blood, along with a poker that also had blood and hair on it. Neighbours mentioned to Frances that it was odd she had heard nothing about the murder, but she insisted she hadn't left the house all day. When authorities searched the cottage, they uncovered clothes stained with blood, hidden in a dark loft. Some of the clothes she was wearing when the police found her were also bloodied. The tartan dress in which the bloodied items were found was identified by her children as what she wore that morning. A wood mallet, recently cleaned but marked with blood and hair, was hidden behind a meal tub. Before the murder, Frances had no money, yet afterwards there was 7 shillings and 7 pence found in her house, along with some tea and sugar that had gone missing from Anne's cottage. When Frances was arrested, she tried to blame her mother, but her mother had a solid alibi. At the trial, it became clear that earlier that day, Anne's brother had lent Frances' husband 2 shillings and 6 pence as he was heading off to work. Although Anne had previously lent Frances small amounts of money, she had stopped doing so recently, leading to arguments about firewood. During her trial, Frances made a heartfelt plea to the judge, Lord Deas, as he was about to sentence her to death. She cried out, "Oh, my lord, please don't do that. Give me anything but that. I'd rather die of anything else. Oh, my children." After she was sentenced to death, many people in Dumfries worked hard to get her sentence changed so that town could avoid the unpleasant sight of an execution. A petition with over 2,000 signatures was sent to the Home Office, including one signed by 3,187 women. A group of local women even met with Sir George Grey to plead for her. Later, Frances confessed to the murder, citing jealousy as the main reason. She believed that Anne had too much influence over her husband. On Friday, the prison notified everyone that Sir George Grey did not see a reason to intervene, and the law would be upheld. In her final days, Frances became very distressed. On Saturday, the prison chaplain visited her and urged her to prepare for her fate. Hearing this news, she became very upset and overwhelmed with grief. She had 3 visits with her husband, the last being on Monday, where she shared a tearful farewell with her family. The parting between her and her children was especially heartbreaking. While she appeared less emotional toward her husband, fueling rumors that their marriage was not a happy one, especially since he was 15 years older than her. That night, she suffered a hysterical fit, staying in distress for quite some time. While she slept, a scaffold, borrowed from Edinburgh, was set up above the wall in the prison yard. By 8 o'clock, the hangman, Calcraft, and 2 assistants entered her cell. Frances was restrained while she sobbed and moaned continuously. Then, the sombre procession began, with the hangman's assistants carrying her along as she surrendered to them like a child. There were no solemn bells ringing from the prison, nor any burial service read. As she turned a corner in the prison, Frances caught her first glimpse of the scaffold, and a chill ran through her body. She looked at the grim structure in terror and cried out, "Oh, let me rest for just a moment." Her request was quickly granted. Then, with the help of her assistants, she began the slow climb up to the scaffold. In her distress, she wept loudly, repeatedly calling out, "Oh, my children." Just as the hangman, Calcraft, was about to proceed with his duty, someone shouted, "Stop." A messenger rushed through the courtyard, panting, and handed a letter to the governor of the jail. Everyone froze in anticipation, including Calcraft, hoping it might be new orders from the Home Office. After reading the message, the governor shared it with the reporters. For the reader's sake, we now provide the details of that letter. The letter included a telegraph for a message to the Evening Herald. The governor urged, "Go on," and the grim process continued. Between her two assistants, the heartbroken Frances was lifted. She was so thin and pale from her suffering that she looked much older than her 27 years, almost like a woman of 70. Her cheeks were sunken, and she hung her head low, though every now and then she would lift it suddenly to glance at the crowd below. Behind her came Calcraft, the hangman, with a new coil of rope in hand, his bushy white beard and black velvet cap making him look imposing. He took off her cap and replaced it with one he had in his pocket, all while she continued to sob and speak frantically. The rope was then placed around her neck. However, instead of having a hook ready to attach to the beam above, Calcraft had to call for a pair of steps. He climbed up to tie the rope to the beam, a task that took nearly 2 minutes, during which the terrified woman stood shivering between her two supporters. Once everything was prepared, the rest happened quickly. Calcraft and his assistants lifted her onto the narrow trapdoor, pulled the bolt, and in a single moment, it was over. As Calcraft left the station at 11:15 a.m., he was greeted with jeers and shoves from the crowd. He wore a blooming wallflower pinned to his coat pocket and took the insults in stride. Number 2. The murder of George Anthony Leonard. On the evening of August 6, 1933, Constable George Leonard was biking through the northeastern area of Regina, North Dakota. This region was mostly made of warehouses and small factories, surrounded by open fields, so a bicycle was essential for him to cover his beat effectively. He had been on his patrol for less than an hour when he stopped near the Canadian Liquid Air Plant on 4th Avenue and Winnipeg Street. There, he noticed 3 men acting suspiciously near the back entrance. Nearby, a teenager named Donald Campbell was out for a walk with his friend, Ardis Annie. He happened to see what happened next. Constable Leonard got off his bike and told the men to stop. One of the suspects refused and, instead, pointed a gun at him, demanding he stick 'em up. During this tense moment, Donald observed that Constable Leonard was still holding onto his bicycle. He heard Leonard say, "What?" as he tried to move toward the wall of the building for cover. The gunman followed him closely and, just as Leonard reached the wall, the suspect shot him. Leonard attempted to pull out his revolver from under his uniform, but was shot 2 more times before he could react. Donald watched in fear as the 3 men fled in different directions. The shooter ran toward the railway tracks to the west, while the other 2 suspects dashed off to the east. Quickly, Donald rushed to Winnipeg Street, hoping to find a nearby police officer for help. Meanwhile, despite his injuries, Leonard managed to crawl along the wall toward a door. He managed to throw one leg over the ledge, pushing up on the steel sliding door, which was already cracked open. An Estherline worker saw Leonard fall to the ground and rushed to assist him, but Leonard could only mutter a few words before he passed away. This tragedy occurred just 1 day after his 28th birthday. Inspector Fred Toop heard about the shooting at 9:50 p.m. that night. He immediately pressed a button that rang a gong 4 times, summoning the patrol wagon. He called for an ambulance, directing it to the scene, and notified the hospital to prepare for an emergency operation. He also instructed the sergeant on duty to contact all officers, both on and off duty, and reached out to the chief constable for support. As the patrol wagon arrived at the police station, Toop sent one of the officers to pick up 2 nearby detectives, and then raced the wagon to the crime scene to get Leonard to the hospital. Back at the police office, he coordinated with the mounted and railway police, sending available officers out to search the outskirts of the city. They aimed to block any routes and catch the gunmen before they could escape Regina. Both city and railway police conducted thorough searches day and night. The next day, on August 7th, 1933, Coroner W. A. Thompson opened an inquest into Constable Leonard's death. An autopsy revealed that 3 bullets had struck him. 1 bullet entered his right arm just below the armpit and exited the front. Another entered low on his back, passed through his left breast, and severed a pulmonary artery, while the last bullet entered on his right breast and exited through his back, just grazing the top corner of his heart. The funeral for Constable George Leonard took place on the morning of Wednesday, August 9th, 1933, and was led by Reverend Father P. F. Hughes. A long procession of about 10 blocks followed the hearse on its way to the Holy Rosary Roman Catholic Cathedral and then to the Regina Cemetery. Members of the Mounted Police and Regina City Police marched proudly in front of the hearse, followed by the Salvation Army Band. Behind them were workers from the Regina Street, railway, and fire departments, along with the group from the Moose Jaw City Police and representatives from the Trades and Labour Council. Prominent community members followed in their cars, with thousands of residents lining the streets with their hats off in respect as the procession passed by. On the same day as the funeral, the authorities announced a reward of $1,000 for any information that would lead to the arrest and conviction of the 3 men responsible for Constable Leonard's murder. Residents throughout southern Saskatchewan were quick to call in tips. G. H. Burns, who lived at 1431 McIntosh Street, told the police that on Sunday evening, August 6th at 8:40 p.m., as he drove over the CPR crossing at Elphinstone Street, he almost hit a man whose description matched that of one of the gunmen. Rumors spread throughout the community. Some wondered if the suspects were drug addicts or bandits, while others believed Leonard had caught them during a burglary, causing them to shoot him in panic. There were also questions about whether his shooting was connected to a robbery at a candy store in the Grand Theatre that same weekend. Just a few days earlier, on July 29th, 2 men had tried to break into a vault at the Robert Simpson Western Limited store. Could this be related as well? Even more wild were the rumors that the gunmen were part of the Sankey kidnapping gang, fleeing from the US to hide in Saskatchewan. The gang's leaders, Vern Sankey and Gordon Alcorn, were from Saskatchewan, but the descriptions given by Donald Campbell and Ardis Annie didn't match anyone from that gang. They described the shooter as tall and heavy, around 28 years old, while the other 2 looked younger and smaller. All 3 were dressed poorly, like hobo types. The most plausible theory was that the men were transients who had come from Regina for the 1933 World Grain Fair, which had just ended before the murder. This made it more challenging for the police, as many visitors could potentially be the shooter. As time passed, the investigation grew cold. Nearly a year later, on April 25, 1934, Matt Kowalczyk was brought in for questioning about Leonard's murder. Kowalczyk was believed to be part of a gang of freight car robbers, and authorities had been searching for him, thinking he might provide important information. However, he didn't seem to help much with the case. Shortly after, he was taken to Portage-la-Prairie due to an outstanding warrant for his arrest. Unfortunately, the murder of Constable Leonard was never solved. He became the first police officer killed in the line of duty in Regina. Number 3. Milka Pavlovich, Yugoslavian serial killer. Milka poisoned 16 of her relatives with arsenic, resulting in the deaths of 6 of them. The others, including her husband, became very ill but eventually recovered. Milka was born in 1905 in a small village called Kokinac in Croatia. She came from a very poor family, and life was hard for her and her loved ones. At some point, she married Rad Pavlovich from the nearby village of Stari Pavliani, moving into his home and working as a milkmaid. Milka was childless and bitter, and many people in her village looked down on her. In March 1934, Milka bought arsenic from a local pharmacy under a fake name, claiming it was for killing rats. She took the poison home and added it to the food she prepared for Rad, who soon started vomiting violently and died. His death didn't raise any suspicions, and since they had no children, Milka inherited his estate. Over the following months, she went on to poison other relatives, primarily from the Jagodic family, in the same way. 4 members of this family were admitted to a clinic in Zagreb with severe stomach cramps. Slavka Jagodic, her daughter Sava, an unnamed servant, and a close family relative. Tragically, all 4 of them died shortly after being admitted. The remaining 9 members of the Jagodic family survived but suffered long-lasting effects from the poison. On July 2nd of the same year, another mysterious death occurred when a Romani blacksmith named Miso Djordjevic died in extreme pain, much like those who had died before him. This sparked suspicion among local villagers, who began to point fingers at Milka Pavlovich, whose husband had died in a similar way just months earlier. She was arrested, and the prosecutor's office ordered that all the deceased individuals be dug up and tested for arsenic. Initially, Milka insisted that she was innocent, but she eventually confessed that she had poisoned her relatives to gain their wealth. This confession confirmed when autopsies revealed lethal amounts of arsenic in Rad Pavlovich, the Jagodic family members, and Miso Djordjevic. Milka admitted to pouring the poison into biscuits, salt, and other foods while cooking alone in the kitchen, serving it to her unsuspecting victims. After a 6-day trial, Milka was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to death. During the trial, it was revealed that she had even planned to poison a 2-year-old child, the heir to an inheritance, by putting arsenic in a loaf of bread. Luckily, the child's mother intervened just in time. On May 18, 1935, Milka was executed by hanging in Bielovar for her crimes. Number 4. The Baldwinsville Homicide. In June 1874, 2 men were fishing in the Seneca River near Baldwinsville, New York, when they spotted something floating in the water that looked like a bundle of clothes. When they got closer, they realized it was actually the body of a man, weighed down so heavily that they couldn't pull it ashore without help. His feet were tied to a heavy rock that weighed 68 pounds, and a second rock, which had been tied around his neck, had come loose, allowing the body to rise to the surface. The left side of his skull showed signs of being smashed, and the local medical examiner concluded that he had been murdered. After spending months in the water, his face was so decomposed that it was hard to recognize. This shocking discovery stirred up a lot of excitement in the small farming community of Baldwinsville. No one in the area had reported a missing person, and with the body so badly decomposed, it seemed unlikely anyone would ever know who it was. However, some items found in his pocket, a tin spoon, a pack of sewing needles, and a piece of calico cloth, eventually led to his identification as Francis A. Colvin. Colvin had once lived with John Pickard and his wife, who had helped him with a few tasks. The spoon was part of a set he had bought, and he had given several to Miss Pickard. He carried one with him to take his medicine for lung issues. The sewing needles were used as he tried to add a pocket to his coat, which Miss Pickard finished for him and even added lapels. He had wrapped the cloth around his toes to avoid chafing, and the pocket and lapels were still visible on his coat. A dentist who had treated Colvin was able to confirm his identity. Colvin didn't have any family in the area and had very few friends, mainly the Pickards. After returning from the Civil War, he lived a reclusive life in a small shack in the woods until the Pickards offered him a place to stay. He had left their home around December 1873 to work on a nearby farm and mentioned plans to move to Syracuse for better pay. So, when people noticed he was missing, no one thought much of it. Colvin was known to be thrifty and had saved up around $3,000 in cash and notes, all of which were now missing. He also had a mortgage for about $350 on property owned by John Pickard, which had been sold to a man named Payne Bigelow. When questioned, Bigelow said he bought the mortgage from a farmhand named Bishop Vader, who also worked for Daniel Lindsay. Consequently, Vader was arrested in connection with Colvin's murder. Vader denied any involvement and claimed that a man named Dwayne Peck was the real murderer. Meanwhile, Owen, the son of Daniel Lindsay, was spreading rumors that Peck had killed Colvin. The police arrested Peck but soon found no evidence linking him to the crime, so they released him. This investigation left many questions unanswered, leaving the community in shock over the murder of Francis Colvin. Bishop Vader was a straightforward man, not unintelligent, but lacking the courage to say no when someone influential told him what to do. After being questioned for a long time, he revealed that Owen Lindsay was the person giving him orders. While they were both working on Lindsay's father's farm, Owen asked Vader to find out how much money Francis Colvin was carrying. Trusting him, Colvin shared the information. Owen came up with a plan to take Colvin's money. On the morning of December 19th, 1873, he told Vader to lead Colvin into the barn. As Colvin was milking a cow, Owen snuck up behind him and struck him on the head twice with the flat side of an axe. After knocking him out, Owen searched Colvin's pocket and took a pocketbook filled with cash and notes. He took $1,500 for himself and gave $500 to Vader. Then they hid Colvin's body. Owen instructed Vader to rent a boat, and if anyone asked about Colvin's whereabouts, he should say that Colvin had gone to the city. He also gave Vader 2 mortgages from the pocketbook and told him to go to Syracuse, pretending to be Colvin and sell them. Vader thought it would be easier to sell them in Baldwinsville, so he sold one to Payne Bigelow. As night fell, they loaded Colvin's body into a sleigh and took it to the boat Vader had rented. After putting the body in the boat, Lindsay tied rocks to it. In the deepest part of the river, they threw the body overboard. Once the police heard Vader's story, they examined the sleigh and found bloodstains on the floorboards. They arrested Owen Lindsay and charged both him and Vader with the murder of Francis Colvin. Although both men were charged with first-degree murder, Lindsay was seen as the main suspect. They were tried separately, starting with Lindsay's case first. The prosecution spent part of the trial proving that the body found in the river was Colvin's. Their key witness against Lindsay was Bishop Vader. However, Lindsay's attorney objected to Vader's testimony since he was also charged with the same crime. After considering both sides, the judge ruled that Vader could not testify against Lindsay. The prosecution then dropped the charges against Bishop Vader for the time being, leaving the option to charge him again later. Vader's testimony took over a day and was damaging for Lindsay, as he told the same story he had shared with the police. During the trial, Colvin's skull was presented as evidence, showing a severe injury. This suggested that the blow to Colvin's head had been made by a right-handed person, while Vader was left-handed. Next, 2 college professors were brought in to examine the blood from the sleigh. Lindsay had claimed the bloodstains came from pigs they had carried in the sleigh, but the professors concluded, based on the size of the blood cells, that it was human blood, not pig blood. Lindsay's defense tried to create doubt about when the murder happened. They brought in witnesses who said they saw Colvin playing croquet on December 19th, attending a birthday party, and even butchering pigs days later. They argued that only Bishop Vader was guilty of the murder and that he had falsely accused Lindsay to cover his own tracks. The trial continued, revealing more about this shocking crime. The trial lasted 10 days. After 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Owen Lindsay was sentenced to be hanged on March 26, 1975, but the verdict was appealed, postponing the execution for nearly a year. His attorneys challenged the validity of Bishop Vader, an accomplice in the murder, as a witness. The New York Supreme Court confirmed that the criminal courts have discretionary power in this respect and let the verdict stand. On February 11, 1876, Owen Lindsay was hanged in the courtyard of the Onondaga County Penitentiary. He was urged to confess his crimes, but he maintained his innocence to the end. During his time leading up to the execution, Lindsay's story attracted a lot of attention from the public and the press. Many people discussed the fairness of the trial and whether justice was truly served. As the date of his execution approached, there were debates about possible clemency, but none were granted.